Hello! When it comes to access control systems extending beyond basic functions of managing access points, the topic of light and sound indication of reading devices cannot be overlooked. Thanks to flexible adjustment of reader's indication, user can quickly understand what's happening at any moment or what system requires from them. In the previous video, we explored Sigur MR100 series reader's capabilities in configuring light and sound indication, discussed reader's configuration via Wiegand interface and OSDP with proprietary SSDP setting, enabling configuration of response to almost any system event. In this video, we will talk about how Sigur can interact with readers from third-party manufacturers. It's important to note that although the functional list when working with such readers is more modest, these capabilities can also meet most user needs. Typically, readers based on their indication control methods can be divided into two groups. The initial group comprises of devices that possess distinct indication control lines for connecting them to the controller. These are readers with Wiegand and touch memory interfaces. The second group includes readers with an OSDP interface, which involves interaction with devices using only 3 lines, both for card reading and for controlling their indication. Sigur controllers, in turn, support connecting up to 3 independent indication lines for each reader. On the E4 model controller, the terminals LED red, LED green, and BIP on each of the 4-port reader blocks are responsible for connecting such lines. Enables flexible configuration of devices' response to events requiring additional signaling. The controllers also support reader indication control via the OSDP interface in accordance with the standard specification. In order to more vividly illustrate the difference between readers of different models, within this video we will be considering the following categories of devices. Budget segment readers with simple design and minimal capabilities for light and sound indication. In our case, this is Matrix 2. Readers with connection via the Wiegand interface and indication control through separate lines. As an example, we have prepared an HID multiclass reader, and readers from a higher price segment with the ability to work via the OSDP interface. In our case, it will be a reader from the manufacturer Suprema. The cost of the reader depends on the completeness of reading functions for various types of identifiers in one mode or another, as well as its light and sound indication capabilities for events in the system. As mentioned earlier, there are readers whose indication control is carried out through separate lines. Typically, depending on the price segment of the reader, the number of these lines may vary. Accordingly, cheaper models may not have the capability to control its indication at all. In other words, the reader reproduces the same pre-programmed indication for any event in the system. In our example, this is Matrix 2. This reader does not have built-in lines to control its indication. Only power connection lines are available, 12 volts and GND, and data transmission, date 0. To demonstrate the reader's operation, connect only the device's power line and present an authorized card. The reader was able to successfully read the identifier and accurately played the light and sound indication. Now let's present an unauthorized card. We observe the same indication, as the reader does not have the capability to control its indication with external devices. Now let's consider readers with the Wiegand interface. They typically have at least 1 line for indication control. In our case, the device has 3 separate digital inputs that are already connected to the controller. We explain how to connect readers via the Wiegand interface to Sigur controllers in a separate video. By default, control of reader's indication is reduced to the controller activating device's corresponding digital codes, rather than detailed adjustment of indication tools themselves, LED or beeper. Readers have detailed config options with apps provided by device manufacturers for such configurations. Let's move on to the software settings of the indication. To do this in the client program, switch to the Equipment tab. Select the desired access point and navigate to its settings. Go to the General tab. In the indication control section, you can set logic for controlling light and sound of devices connected to controller with reader. Configuring indication line for LED 1 and LED 2 is done on respective tabs in the controller's config settings, as well as output terminals with reassignment performed to act as the LED 3 indication line. Let's consider the main parameters in more detail, considering that terminal LED 1 grants permission while LED 2 denies access. Signal access permission enables the selection of a signal from the drop-down list, indicating the access permission. For instance, a brief beep from the beeper, a continuous signal from the green LED, or frequent LED toggling during system wait. On the LED 1 tab, we will configure the checkbox and adjust the parameter for short signal to ensure proper functionality. On LED 2, disable checkbox. To signal access restriction, 3 short signals will be emitted. When the option is activated, if the system restricts access for any reason, a brief triple beep or red LED signal will be given. Check this checkbox on the LED2 board. The first 2 parameters are the basic functions of indicating access permission and restriction. Now let's consider more interesting cases of events to which the system can configure a third-party reader's response when connecting to the controller figures. Signaling the access point status enables the selection of one of the 3 access point states from a drop-down list. Each state is accompanied by a continuous signal indicating whether the point is in normal, locked, or unlocked mode. We should set this parameter on the LED1 tab for the unlocked mode and on the LED2 tab for the locked mode. Let's make sure to configure it correctly to ensure proper functionality. This will help us achieve the desired outcome and meet the requirements of both modes effectively. Signaling other situations. When this option is enabled, the system will signal about other situations occurring at the access point, such as door held open, intrusion, pin entry waiting, and others. Set parameter only for LED2 tab. Invert the resulting signal. To configure synchronous switching of signals for the enabling and disabling LEDs, we will not need this parameter. On the LED3 tab, we will disable all settings because we will not be separately using the third digital input of the reader. As an alternative for controlling the reader indication in the required access point settings, there are access denial pulse or access permission parameters for input or output. In other words, specific lines can be specified for the controller to use in reproducing access permission or restriction indication separately for input and output in the desired direction. Once all necessary settings on LAT1, LAT2, and LAT3 tabs are set, we will proceed to demonstrate reader indication control. To begin with, let's present the authorized card to the reader. The device successfully read the identifier and played a light and sound indication of access permission. Now let's present the restricted card. The device produced a triple light and sound indication of access denial. Let us simulate door holding events. The device continuously reproduces the prohibition indication in accordance with the software settings while the event is relevant and ongoing. Now let's change the access point to an unlocked state and then to a locked mode. We observe the corresponding signal from the reader regarding the status of the access point. And finally, let's consider the indication in case of an unusual event of waiting for the accompanying person. Let's present the employee's card. We observe the indication of waiting for the accompanying card. We apply the administrator's card. The reader reproduces access permission indication. With this, the reader configuration with separate lines for controlling the indication is completed. Let's move on to the next case, a reader with an OSDP interface. I would like to remind you that this interface does not require complex switching and operates on just 3 lines. Simultaneously, the standard offers many chances to configure responses replicated by the reader upon the controller's command. To do this, in the Client program, let us go to the File, Settings, Indication menu. In this step, we will create a brand new indication profile by simply clicking on the corresponding button provided. Let's give it a clear name, for example, OSDP. Now let's choose the right equipment combo, in our case an external OSDP reader, Sigur controller. Next, let's pick indication in idle state, for example steady light. As the indicator color, we will set white. Then, in the controller events section, it is necessary to select the reaction that the reader should reproduce for the required events. There are preset reactions available for selection or custom ones can be configured. To configure user reactions, we need to go to the OSDP Reactions tab, which is primarily designed for working with third-party OSDP readers and their interactions. In this step, we will generate a new reaction by clicking on the plus icon that is located in the interface of the application. The process of setting up reaction parameters involves 2 blocks, configuring light indication and configuring sound indication. Let's configure the first reaction for system alarm events and give it a clear name, for example, attention. In the light indication settings section, let's select the type of indication. Since we expect the reaction to be played continuously while alarm events are relevant, we will set it to continuous blinking. Choose colors, specify duration for displaying each color, In the next step, we will navigate to the Sound Indication Settings section and locate the checkbox labeled Use. By checking this box, we can activate the functionality of the built-in beeper reader. Optionally, you can also adjust the sound duration, pause between signals, and number of repetitions. Since our reaction plays continuously, check the continuous checkbox for relevant events. Using the same principle, we'll create reactions for granting and denying access, as well as for waiting for an action, like opening the door. Next, it is necessary to return to the Indication Profile Settings window and set the reaction we configured next to each event. We will set the highest priority for alarm events, for example 10, and for all others, the same, for instance 5. Press Apply to save the settings. The setup of the indication profile for the third-party OSDP reader is done, and we can now upload the profile to the controller. In order to accomplish this, we should proceed to the Equipment tab. Select the desired access point and open its settings to make the necessary adjustments. To access the OSDP Devices tab, we must navigate to the Settings editing window and make the switch in the interface. Next to the reader we require, press the Change Indication Profile button and select the profile we have configured. Waiting for the upload. After that, we click on the Apply button and then on the OK button to save the settings. The reader's indication setup is now complete. Let's test its operation. Let's present an authorized card to the reader. The device successfully read the identifier and reproduced the configured light and sound indication of access permission. Now let's present the unauthorized card. The device reproduced the configured access denial indication. Let's simulate a door held open event. The device consistently shows the configured indication as per the software settings for the duration that the event remains relevant and applicable. Now, we will switch the access point to the unlocked state and then to the locked mode as per the required configuration. We see the signal at the reader showing the status of the access point. Now let's verify the indication during a non-standard event of a person waiting. Display the employee card. We observe the indication of waiting for the accompanying card that is required for entry. Introducing the administrator card. The reader displays the indication of access permission granted for entry into the restricted area. Use all the features for managing the reader's feedback with Sigur. That's it from me. Until we meet again.